Hello and welcome to the first web conference of the World Association of Public Employment Services, WAPES. My name is Miguel Peromingo and I will be the host for this event for the next 90 minutes about the topic, the future of work after COVID-19 and especially the role of public employment services in it. We have a couple of very interesting speakers. And we will have
de los servicios de empleo público. Tendremos algunos ponentes muy interesantes.
The details of this web conference. It is my pleasure and honor to give the floor to the president of the hosting organization of WAPES, Monsieur MADANI, the president of WAPES, and also the director general of the Public Employment Services of Morocco. So, Mr. President, the floor is yours. I see the connection is probably not working over there. Let me tell you that more than 80 people have registered for this conference from all 5 continents, so we have a broad range of participants. And today we will be discussing with different speakers how the future of work has transformed now, because I think it is fair to say that the future of work was so far mostly a topic on conferences. A lot of things materialized already, but on conferences it was discussed a lot, and now it has, through the crisis we're all going through the COVID-19 crisis, it has become more immediate. All the topics that the future of work has brought up, like where we want to work, how we're working, how is gig work creating more freedom, but at the same time also bringing up issues of security. Which roles are the actors on the labor market playing? Which roles were they playing? Which roles are they going to play in the future? How is the social dialogue going to work in the future? And also, how will decent work be guaranteed? So all this has become more immediate, more critical, and it is now up to us, also to public employment services, to co-create a fair labor market 4.0. The COVID-19 crisis is in many ways a different crisis to others. Let's say, for example, the financial crisis we had 10 years ago, because the shock it will have for the labor market is already happening now. It's not coming later. The effects on the labor market are here. More than 400 million enterprises of all sizes worldwide might have to close or are closing already. Most of them in wholesale or retail trade, but also many other sectors might be affected. End of April, more than 80% of employers and more than 60% of own account workers live and work in countries affected by the closures. So depending on how the measures will be now, that might increase or lower. 1.6 billion workers in the informal economy, an economy which is also a particular focus of WAPES members, will be affected by up to 60% decline in salaries, especially in Latin America and sub-Saharan Africa. And public employment services are in a very important and crucial position within this crisis. They are already now doing a lot of emergency work. They are helping paying out benefits, short-term work allowances. In the midterm, they might need to change their services to become more virtual, to manage the unparalleled inflow that we're having of unemployed workers. And in the long term, or midterm, long term, they might also take a stronger stance in career guidance in the changing careers through the crisis, but also in the world, in the future world of work, and the relocation of jobs. Digital services, I think, are key in this. That's on one hand side important to upgrade the digital services and the public employment services themselves, but also to upskill job seekers and employers. In Europe, the European Union, only 45% of people, or 45% of people have low or no digital skills, so that's almost half. And cities, of course, have a greater coverage of digital means, but all the access to jobs, all the access to job information, labor market information, and also the possibility to telework, something that is might become very crucial in the future is given only if you also have the digital skills and the possibility to work in it. So the future of work, or shall we call it the presence of work, because it's already here, is about finding a good way of capitalizing on the advantages it brings, and also lowering the risks and the impact it has through crisis, through this, like the one we're living through. We might also have to create situations where public employment services work closer with health services, and also partner up with a lot more network partners than they have been doing that before. And I think international cooperation is crucial here, and that's why webinars, web conferences like this one, to continue exchanging best practices even if we cannot meet in person, are so important. I would like to take this opportunity to go back to the President. Maybe the connection works now. Monsieur le Président, the floor is yours.
Bonjour. Bonjour.
Hello, hello. Hello.
Je ne sais pas si la cam marche.
I'm not sure that the webcam is working though. Anyway, hello? Can someone confirm that I'm online and that it is working and that my webcam is working? Is my webcam working? Hello everyone. It is a pleasure for our association, the WAPES association, to organize this first webinar, web conference. I'd like to remind you that this is the World Association for Public Employment Services. Up until now, we would hold our events physically speaking, right? We are a transnational network, and therefore contacts are essential in our work, direct contacts. But since the world is evolving and reshaping itself, we had to adapt ourselves, we as public employment services, and this is crystal clear given the course of evolution that we're going through right now. The raison d'être of our association, our network, is first and foremost to... Well, sorry, I'll try to turn on my webcam, my webcam, so that you can see me. I'm just going to try it out now. Sorry about that. Just a few seconds. I just can't make out where my webcam is. This is the first time, I'm sorry, that I'm using this. I'm used to working with different platforms, but anyway, I'm not going to have you wait too long. I'm just going to try to sort it out now so that we're good for the rest of the meeting. Because for now, I just have the microphone working, but no webcam. I'm really sorry about this. Anyway, let us continue with what we were saying. So, as I was saying to you, one of the core assignment that we have in our association, one of our first objective is to enable the members of this association to exchange good practices among themselves, to try to develop common grounds on technical aspects, because we are public employment services, so we work on the ground, we create procedures, we create new ways of working. We're not an academic thinking cell, let's say, but we're very important to make the job market evolve, and we need to come up with new operational ways of working, and we need to exchange good practices that we have all over the world. And what's more, given this current crisis context, this plight that we are knowing everywhere in the world now, we have to rethink the way that we work, our core mission, so that we can make our governments, our countries, save time and energy while trying to cope with this new reality. This crisis is everywhere because it is disseminating so fast. It is touching every country at different levels, of course, but this is a common crisis nonetheless, and it's almost identical everywhere because the effect of this pandemic is having a dire impact on the job markets and on employment as a whole. And as public employment services, we are directly impacted by this crisis. We didn't have to intervene during the crux of the sanitary crisis, but during this crisis, nonetheless, we've been called upon to reflect on the future and on how countries can restart working. And everything that happened during the pandemic on the job market, I mean, that was supposed to be momentaneous, right? It shouldn't last too long. But one would, I mean, it was impossible to completely grasp what the consequences and the impacts of this sanitary crisis would be. And as we are going back to normal, we have to reflect on what the new reality is going to be and what we can put in place to make sure that we cope with this new reality we have in front of us. And we, as public employment services, we were called upon, as I was saying, to reflect on the post-crisis era, let's say. Economists, scientists, they have already tried to reflect on what the future of this crisis will be. I mean, the future of the world following this crisis will be. But we, as public employment services, we also have a part to play. And no one can actually foretell what the definitive impact of this crisis will be on the job market, because unemployment was already present before the crisis started. But how bad is this going to be following the crisis? What's going to be the impact at the end of the day? And no one could have foretold what was going to happen. No one could have known beforehand that this was going to happen. And this also is going to have an impact on full employment in the Nordic countries. So a lot of uncertainties for the future. Public employment services have been called upon, as I said, to be ready to cope with the new situations that's going to come around in all the countries over the world, even though those situations will be different from one country to the next. So we have to rethink ourselves, to think about new ways of working. We have to be creative. In very short period of time, we have to come up with new ideas, because we won't have the luxury of having a lot of time in front of us to adapt to this new world. We have to try things, to experience new methods, new ways to meet the needs of our economies, of the world's economy. So we need to share, and therefore it is important to share our good practices, our good ideas among ourselves. And that's exactly the point of this workshop that we're going to have here online, and that the WAPES Association is organizing today. So I wish you all welcome, virtually welcome, on behalf of our association, on behalf of all the countries taking part in this endeavor, and on behalf of the General Secretary, I'd like to thank the team of our General Secretariat in Brussels, because they have taken the time to hold this event, to organize and get prepared for this event, even though this is not our habit to hold such a web conference. and it's working fine. So it's great, even though my webcam is not working. But that's minor, of course. I wish I could wave you all a hello, a friendly hello, with my face on your computer, but unfortunately it's not working. Nonetheless, I'd like to thank the whole team and to pay tribute to all the speakers that are going to take the floor today. I'm sure that they will bring their own input to the discussion that will be very fruitful about the future of the job market, and we as public employment services were very much called upon for when society goes back to normal, because there will be more unemployed people, some people who will have to face a new job market reality. We don't really know what the future holds for us. We will be probably surprised by all those new unemployed people. It's going to be a real shock for them, for us, for the whole of society, because of the negative impact of this crisis, this very dire economic impact that we're going to have to face. That's going to touch all parts of society. So I hope that this is going to be one of, the first of a whole series of events. I hope that we'll meet again following this event that we're having right now. I'd like to remind you that the WAPES team in Brussels launched a whole piece of work with the World Organization for Work and the help of all the members with questionnaires, so that we can have more information on how public services will be managed within the context of the COVID crisis, and then questions about the future and how it will look like. So with the ILO and all the countries, we've made this questionnaire, and as soon as the result of this questionnaire comes in, we'll definitely hold and organize a web conference again, so that we can share the results with you. But this will have to be done in collaboration with the ILO, the International Labour Organization, which is our partner in this endeavor. And I'm perfectly convinced that it will be very interesting and fruitful, and I'm sure that all the participants will get something out of this. What we need to do is to demonstrate that public employment services can actually cope with this COVID-19 crisis, and we have a part to play in tomorrow's world, in tomorrow new realities world. Public action is instrumental in this new context, and we are a very important piece of all this. So public action is definitely needed in today's new reality.
Two sections now. We will have two speakers that I will introduce to you in a second. And after that, we will have the possibility to take questions from the floor. You can, however, one of the advantages of this virtual setting, you can ask the questions whenever you like through the chat function that is here under the screen. And if you click into the chat function, you will see one box that says questions. So don't write it into the general chat box, because then it gets mixed up with other messages. But if you write it into questions, you can do that during the presentations. Then we will pick them up later on during a question and answer session. Okay? And now I would like to introduce Fons LEROY. Fons LEROY is a well-known influencer, if I may call you that, Fons, in the public employment service world. You have introduced pretty early the idea of the public employment services conductor of the labor market, and the vision you had was well ahead of the future of work. So I think that you introduced very early the idea of public employment services being at the core of the future of work. So it'd be interesting to see your views on it now. Fons, for those who don't know him, was the CEO of WDAB, the small but very active and successful public employment service of Flanders. He was also the chair of the European Network of PES. Now he's retired, but I think very far from inactive. Fons, the floor is yours.
I think, I hope you can understand me, dear friends of WAPES. I will give you a short presentation on the future of the world of work. I hope my presentation will be shown to you, but first of all, let me set the expectations right, because I will not predict the future of our labor markets, because I'm not Madame Soleil, I cannot predict the future, but foremost because we are living in this so-called VUCA world. And VUCA is an acronym which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And this COVID-19 crisis is unfortunately a perfect illustration of the VUCA world we are living in, because this virus conquered the world in a very short time at an incredible speed. It creates a lot of uncertainties in families, in our economies, on our labor markets, in governments. It's also a very complex issue. The virus is complex, but it creates also new complexities, for example, in how we should deal with each other, how we should live together with each other. And last but not least, it's also provoking new ambiguities, for example, in the balance between the human approach and the digital approach. So we're living in this VUCA world. I hope I can go to my presentation now. Yeah. You see, this is the VUCA world, but we must be aware that this COVID-19 crisis is not the last major change that we will now in the decade to come. We will face a lot of major changes in our society, in our economies, and on our labor market. For example, well, we are still facing this digital revolution, and we will see how artificial intelligence, smart computing, machine learning, robotization will alter our world, but also will alter the world of work in a short time. We are also confronted in the years to come with new migration pressure in Europe, from Africa, for example, and with probably the biggest threat on Mother Earth, the climate change, which will also change our attitudes, but also will change our economy and our labor market. And of course, this COVID-19 crisis was already the fourth health crisis that we know, and there will be also other health risks in the years to come. So we are living in this VUCA world, and we are dealing with a lot of major changes. Some changes are foreseen, but some changes are not foreseen. And when I'm looking to the evolutions on the labor market with, let's say, my experience as a labor market observer for more than 40 years, I see sometimes the invisible hand interfering in our labor markets and our economies. Let's, for example, look at the two latest big crises that we had. The financial crisis in 2007-2008, and now this COVID-19 crisis. A lot of countries reached very low unemployment rates and very high employment rates just before both crises. And even just before this crisis, politicians were talking about full employment. We were nearly to full employment. And then suddenly, in a few months' time, the world of work changed and we were confronted with massive unemployment. So, at the moment that we are facing full employment, you see this invisible hand occurring and provoking new unemployment. And of course, needless to say that these evolutions and these crises are very frustrating for governments, for our economy, for companies, for working people, but also for public employment services. At one moment, we are faced with severe budget cuts and reduced staff, and then a few moments later, we are confronted with a lot of new clients and job seekers. And so the question is not only how do we get on track, but how do we get on track in a more sustainable way, so that we as public employment services can also at the maximum anticipate these kind of crises that we will face. And I will give you a few, four, in my view, important policy frameworks which should alter the world of work, which should make the world of work in the future a better place to work. And the first policy framework is a well-known framework for the WAPES community. And that's the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals developed by the United Nations. Why is it well known by the WAPES members? Because it's an integrated part of the WAPES value charter. And it should also be an integrated part of the strategies of all companies all over the world. Because we need to invest in sustainable solutions to make the world also viable for our children and our grandchildren. And that's why we should invest in those Sustainable Development Goals and the 6 P's of these development goals. The P's of people, planet, prosperity, peace, pleasure, and partnerships. And this framework should be adopted by governments, by regions, by companies, by schools, by NGOs, by local authorities, but also by public employment services. And the second framework is a translation of the P of people of the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's a well-known Finnish model of how do we cope with people and companies. How can we build sustainable relations between people and companies? And they elaborated, Professor Ilmarinen elaborated the so-called House of Workability. And as you see on the slide, this House of Workability has 4 floors. And it's not a match that, like we do as public employment services, a one-time match between a candidate, a job seeker, and the company. Now it's a continuous match on 4 different dimensions along the career of people. So the first floor, and this is a floor which was very important during the Corona crisis, it was headlighted by the COVID-19 crisis, is of course we need to invest in mentally and physically fit people. People should have the health and the functional capacities to work. So we should also look towards companies who are investing in the fitness of their people. a continuous fit between the capabilities, the physical and the mental capabilities of people and companies. The second floor is our core business, let's say our traditional core business, is to make sure that there is a fit between the competences, the skills of the people, and the competence and the skills needed by the company. And the third floor, it's also necessary to build sustainable relations between people and companies. There should not only be a good fit on skills, but the people should share the values of the companies, and the companies should have the same values as the people. So there should be in the future also a value fit between people and companies. And the fourth floor is about how work is organized. Do people have good work? Do they have the possibilities to follow traineeships? Do they have career guidance facilities? What about leadership in companies? How is the work community organized in companies? So these four floors are very important, because if the match is on the four floors, then you can say you have an holistic human resources approach. You have really turned your company into a house of workability. And of course, these four floors are linked with each other through the stairs in the house. But also, every floor has a window towards the outside world, so that we also should take into account the evolutions which are passing by in this modern world. For example, diversity, inclusiveness, and so on. So the second framework is, how can we build and turn our companies into houses of workability and assure that people have sustainable relations with their companies, and that it's not a one size fit, but is a holistic fit between companies and their people. The third framework is the framework of the 21st century skills. And I strongly believe that public employment services should invest in these 21st century skills, not only making sure that the staff of public employment services has these 21st century skills, but also all job seekers and working people. Because it's not only about having the right functional and professional skills, it's foremost having the general skills which one needs in an ever-changing world of work. For example, you see the yellow skills about communication, collaboration, social and cultural skills to deal with more diverse workforces. You see the gray skills. We are living in a digital world. We are living in a digital economy. We are working on a digital labor market. So people should have basic IT skills, media literacy, information skills, and computer thinking. We also see the red skills which are necessary in the future. People need to have a critical mind, creativity, entrepreneurial skills, and be solution-driven people. And also those green skills are important if we are dealing in the future with the climate crisis. How can we think in terms of reuse, redesign, recreation, instead of always looking for new materials and creating a lot of waste in our companies or on the market. And finally, those two blue skills which are key on the labor market of tomorrow. People who have career competences, who can steer their own careers in a sustainable way. Of course, with the help of public employment services and their partners, but also people who are eager to learn, because lifelong learning is part of the future of the world of work. So the third framework, which is for me very important, is how can we acquire those 21st century skills to make sure that people can anticipate at changes, that they can steer their own careers, that they are strong enough to build their own careers, that they are very creative, and that they can look for solutions in strong teams. My fourth framework has to do with technology, robotization, and digitalization. So how can we put technology at the service of people, at the service of the labor market, at the service of society? This is for me one of the biggest questions of the future. How can we not deal with robotization, but how can we move towards cobotization and look for new relations between humans and robots, where we use the robots for all the heavy work, for repetitive works, for dull works. Let the robots do that kind of work, and let's reserve the work for people where you need more creativity, empathy, dialogue, and so on. So if we are smart, we can strive for more complementarity between the robots and the humans, and create, through this new balance, we create better work for all the people who are at work. And of course, if we want to move towards this globalization, people need the right skills, and that's why I mentioned those basic IT skills, media literacy, computational thinking, and information skills as necessary skills for the 21st century skills. But it's my strong belief that technology creates new opportunities for the labor market. Not only because the economy is going in a more digital way, also due to the COVID-19 crisis, but also if we use technology right, we can cope with some diseases that we know today on the labor market. Technology can create a more inclusive labor market because, well, heavy work can be eliminated. Technology can create and stimulate more autonomous working places, can facilitate job crafting, can increase the lifelong learning opportunities. So let's use these technologies as new opportunities to make our labor markets better for the people that are active on the labor market. And finally, what's the role of public employment services in the 21st century skills, in the 21st century? Well, Miguel already mentioned that I'm really in favor of this role of conductor of the labor market, which was also one of the themes in the long-term strategy of WAPES. But today, with the experience of this COVID-19 crisis, and to anticipate at new crises that we will face in the decades to come, I think we should even broaden our role as conductor of the labor market. First of all, conducting the labor market is feeling yourself responsible for the well-functioning of the labor market. And this has not only to do with matching, it goes far further than matching. It's beyond matching. Matching is only one step in a well-functioning labor market. It's only one item in a well-functioning labor market. So we should also, as already mentioned in the WAPES long-term strategy, we should also support sustainable careers. We should move from agencies dealing with unemployed persons towards career guidance agencies dealing with employed and unemployed persons, and make sure that people are supported by public employment services and their partners to develop their careers by training, by guidance, and so on. And also, we should make sure that people acquire those 21st century skills so that they are well weaponed in the future when they will face new changes in their job, when they have to switch from one job to another, from one sector to another, from one statute to another. So it's also about supporting sustainable careers of people and not only about supporting unemployed people. But a new dimension, in my view, which is not part of the long-term strategy of WAPES yet, is, well, we should also look not only to the side of job seekers, of people at work, but also look to the world of companies, of employers. And we should support companies to become houses of workability, to make sure that people can build a sustainable career within a company. We should also support companies who want to invest in the sustainable development goals, because they see that if they want to exist in a long-term period, that sustainability is the way in the future. So how can we as public employment services support companies in integrating the SDGs in their own business strategy? So conducting is not only about one side of the labor market and modernizing that side of the labor market by investing in career guidance, by investing in training on the 21st century skills. It's also about companies, enterprises, organizations, and how can we make sure that our organizations become sustainable organizations also for their own people who are working in the organizations. And last but not least, walk your talk. It's leading by example. We cannot ask companies to become houses of workabilities and sustainable organizations if we are not ourselves houses of workabilities, if the SDGs are not really the core of our own strategies. So we should walk our talk. We should show an example to the other companies that we as public employment services, we are ahead of evolutions. We are taking our role as a conductor of the labor market seriously. We are leading by example. We are houses of workability, and we create as houses of workability new oases of workability through our cooperation with other companies and employers. Well, dear friends of WAPES, this was a short presentation from my side on how we should deal with the changes in the future, how we should take 4 new frameworks as basis of the actions of public employment services, of the strategy of public employment services, and that if we lead by example, we also can convince other companies to follow the path that we as public employment services has chosen now given the experience of the COVID-19 crisis in our mind. Many thanks for listening to my presentation, and I hope you will have a good discussion on the future of the world of work, because it concerns all public employment services all over the world. But my experience was that WAPES is a strong community, and through cooperation, through exchanging ideas, we really can influence the world of work more than any actor on the labor market. Let's go for it. Thank you very much.
Much, Fons, for your encouraging words. We'll pass the word now over to Professor Alex Nunn, who is the head of the Center for Social, Cultural and Legal Research at the University of Derby in the United Kingdom. Your research, Alex, focuses on labor market governance and inequality, and you're also an expert of public employment services. You have worked in consultancies, among others, for the Inter-American Development Bank and also the European Union. Alex, the floor is yours.
Hello. Hi. Thank you very much, Miguel, and thank you, Fons. And I'll keep my comments very brief because I agree with virtually everything that both Miguel and Fons have said already this morning. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak. It's a really big honour, and I look forward to learning more from the other presenters. I suppose I was asked to speak about the current crisis and the future of work and how that will affect PES, public employment services, into the future. And Fons has already dealt with many of the things that I wanted to say. I suppose it's important, though, to think of both primary and secondary effects of the current crisis. So obviously in the short term we see primary effects as increased unemployment, but also many businesses that were struggling or were feeling competitive effects prior to the crisis simply won't survive. And so I think we can see also longer term patterns of change, such as sectoral restructuring, pressures towards greater automation that Fons was just speaking about. We can perhaps see increased casualisation and more gig economy kind of work, and perhaps counteracting some of the effects, some of the attempts of public employment services and other actors outside of Europe to formalise labour markets also. But we can also see secondary effects around, for example, fiscal pressures that are acute now for finance ministries, but are likely to continue into the future. That will mean different effects in different parts of the world, constrained aid budgets and so on. We may see, I think it was really sensible for Fons to highlight both climate change and migration. So we're likely to see strengthened patterns of migration and perhaps new ones as a result of this crisis. And all that means, I think, that public employment services really are at the forefront of responding, both in the immediate term, but while you're faced with that kind of immediate unemployment problem, I think it's important not to let go of the task of trying to understand just how this process will change the labour markets that you operate within. So it's important to both deal with the immediate pressures and also stay focused on those longer term developments, because they're likely to mean particularly not just high unemployment, but high unemployment for particular social groups. So young people, we know, will find it harder to enter the labour market in the first instance, and you're likely to see new types of job seeker, and they will face skills challenges, not just with reorienting to new technology and new sectors, but also to perhaps, if they haven't undertaken job search for a long period of time, they will be out of touch with the way in which people search for jobs. Now, as we move forward and look towards hopefully an inclusive recovery, I think it's really important that public employment services adopt a kind of inclusive governance approach and see themselves as central to that conducting the labour market role. And that means working in complementary ways, as Miguel said to begin with health and care providers and skills providers, employment regulation and so on, at a national, but also recognising that labour markets are very, very localised often. So often doing that same joining up work at a very local level. And because we're likely to see quite a lot of rapid labour market change, that means including employers in those processes, in that joined up working, partnership working, but also including trade unions or NGOs or advocacy groups, because they're likely to be the ones that know and experience those changes the first, and therefore they're great sources of information for you to learn about those. And in responding, I think obviously in the immediate right now, it's really important to keep people in work wherever possible. So if you can have a role in terms of developing employment retention programs, that's great, or advocating on behalf of such programs. But also where that's not possible, keep people active through training and not let their skills and confidence and so on deteriorate. Obviously abandon or shift expectations about rapid job entry where that's not sensible. That needs to be part of what you're doing. But also, I think, use the current crisis as an opportunity to learn more about the skills needs of your job seekers, which are likely to be changing, to use it as an opportunity to promote or to strengthen, depending on kind of institutional role, social protection systems. We had a concept in Europe a few years ago that was very popular and has kind of ebbed away a little bit since, about flex security, and I think that becomes ever more important. It was a kind of a concept before its time, really, in that sense. So use the crisis as an opportunity to strengthen social protection, to upskill the workforce, and think about the difference between kind of basic skills programs, which can be quite generalised, and more targeted technical skills programs that are about particular employer needs, which are often much smaller types of training programs and much more localised, and to engage different employers. Perhaps where there are institutional supports for employers, they're an opportunity to engage informal sector employers in a new way, for example, and to promote. And I was struck by the climate change comments that Fons was making. So to promote changes in the way in which employers work or work is structured to try and reduce travel and so on. So to promote online working, and also to obviously, given the resource constraints, you are going to have to be faced with the challenge of using more of those kinds of services yourself. And I've made a big kind of play here for understanding the labour market and how it changes in this current crisis. But it's also important for you to share that information, to remember that as a labour market exchange function, one of the really important things that public employment services do is share information to people that won't necessarily have it, about how the labour market is changing. So 4 points, and I'm trying to keep it really brief. So 4 points. 1, keep people in employment or active wherever possible. 2, joined up and inclusive partnership working at all levels. 3, understand the changes that are underway and share that information with others. And 4, high quality, take opportunities to use crisis for promoting social protection, high quality training, and promoting beneficial changes in the way in which work is organised. Okay, I'm really brief and I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
A lot, Alex. I have 2 questions, one for you, Alex, and one for Fons. Let's start with Fons. Fons, you talked about the house of workability, and within that you said that optimally there is a value fit between the people who work there and the values that the company embodies. And I think we all agree that if we had been in jobs where this was the case, that is the great jobs, right? And you also talked a lot about what employers can do and what employers can do to set an example. My question to you is, what can the employees do to improve this value fit? Fons, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Miguel. This important question, because I really believe in this value fit matching. As you know, we in VDAB we already had a competence-based matching system, but we also built on top of that a value fit matching, so that we could make sure that future relations between the employee and the company were sustainable relations. And of course, we see if we are questioning, for instance, young candidates and young job seekers, they are very much aware of the values they find important, more than my generation. We were interested in having a job and through the job having income and so on, but new young people are looking to a more value fit based on, is the company a sustainable company? Is it investing in climate and energy? Is it a company who promotes work-life balances and so on? So you see that the young generations are very much interested in the holistic HR policy of a company. And in interviews, they are questioning the company about how they are dealing with the work-life balance, how they are investing in sustainable careers, how they are investing in a sustainable environment. So it's also, let's say, a possibility for job seekers to question the mission and the strategy of companies. And this is already the case for the young generations. So let's take these generations who are now also experiencing this COVID-19 crisis as an example of how people can deal also with their own careers and jobs in the future.
Fons. Alex, you said that that upskilling will be key, training will be key in the future. So a lot of public employment services have in-house training, or they have the capacity to do training, to do help with vocational training, further training, etc. Many public employment services rely on partnerships for that. What is your view on that for the future? Where should training be coming from? And should public employment services contract out more? Or should public employment services try to do that themselves? What is your view and from your researcher point of view?
From the point of view of the research, I think what always comes out from that is the difference between general skills provision, which can be quite blanket, and I'm sure that much of that can be done in-house, and much more specific sectoral or technical skills that change very rapidly for particular employers, and I think that's hard for public employment services to provide themselves. What they are very well placed to do is to have the connections to understand what the new skills requirements are, and to talk to employers about that, and therefore and then use that information to perhaps commission particular types of training. But it's very hard for public employment services to provide that kind of very specific, localized technical training themselves.
Much, Alex. We're moving to the second part of our webinar. Thank you, Alex and Fons. By the way, we were asked whether these presentations will be provided, Fons presentations. It will, and also the recording of this webinar will be made available by the WAPES Secretariat. We're moving now to 3 presentations for how it looks on the ground in different countries, how public employment services are facing the future of work and especially managing the COVID-19 crisis. We will hear examples from Togo, from Tunisia, and from Spain. And it is my pleasure now to invite Mr. AMOUSSOU, who will present the case of the National Employment Agency of Togo. He is the Director General of the National Employment Agency and Chair of the Conseil Réuni, HR and Management Consulting Company. And his work and expertise focuses for years, apart from managing obviously the public employment service, on vocational training and also making a strong link to employers. Monsieur AMOUSSOU, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup. Vous m'écoutez?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah? Well, thank you very much anyway. First, I'm going to deliver a presentation about the measures that were taken by our National Employment Agency, and then I'm going to be talking about what has been done at the level of our country and talk about the main projects that are currently on the table and on which we would like to work in cooperation with international partners. What I can say first is that it is chaos everywhere. It was chaos everywhere when contamination first started, and when we registered our first casualty because of the virus. Everyone was panicked and shocked. We didn't know what to do, really. But then very quickly we rethought the way that many services were working in interaction with their customers or their partners, and we linked this work with the skills of job seekers. So what we did was to organize small groups of, say, 10 to 15 people, and we would always respect the social distancing measures. So when we had enough space, we would hold physical meetings, but we would limit at a maximum level physical meetings. We didn't want to run risks to be contaminated. So we held interviews with WhatsApp or with other means so that young people coming to our premises could still benefit from our experience, but while respecting social distancing measures. What we've also done is that when we had to issue an employment card, and I'm sorry if I have no PowerPoint presentation, but I don't usually do that, but normally we should use to issue an employment card the computer, but people have to touch a computer, so it's dangerous. So this time we decided to use a different system, using masks, gloves, and just people would tell to someone the data they needed to be computed in the computer, and then somebody else with gloves would type in the data. So that would prevent all risk of contamination. We've also been able to make progress in recruitment services. For instance, we use the biggest room we have in our premises, but just for one candidate. When we have a jury, members are scattered all over the room, and we wash our hands as many times as possible, as much as possible, just to make sure that the risk is minimal. Everything is digitalized, and interviews are held online every time it's possible. We've also a program of internship for young people in companies, and here we have decided to work hand in hand with companies, and those companies who apply preventive measures, we've worked with them in priority. All right? Because otherwise we wouldn't send intern to their premises if they were not abiding by basic safety measures. because our first priority is the health of our job seekers and our employees as well. So we've given instructions to our communication service as well to grant more help, more credits to people who want to launch their own company. Very often the problem in our country is that young people don't have access to new digital tools. And we've put in place new methods so that they could have an easier access while coping with this new reality. We've also made sure that people would be, that we would only have physical presence if needed. So we've reduced the number of times that people physically meet. We've used Skype conferences as much as possible. For instance, to hold my meetings now with advisors and other services directors, we use Zoom as a platform. And when we don't have enough internet connection, we try to find other solutions. But it's not always easy, because in some provinces we have no 4G connection, we have no Wi-Fi connection, so sometimes it's very complicated. So in terms of projects in the pipeline on which we're currently working, well, we're working on an e-learning service project first, because our first priority today is job seekers. And the model that we currently use is the one that is also used in South Korea, the one that we got familiar with in autumn 2017-2018 during the conference we had in Paris. That's the model we want to apply to offer as many online trainings as possible. Relevant trainings for job seekers, but we have to combine online learning with physical learning, while still respecting social distancing measures. We also know that we need to develop a new offering in terms of training for the future workers or the people who already work. Because the problem with crisis is that unemployment very often goes up. And we, as public employment services, we have a part to play, as you know. And therefore, we need to offer the right kind of training to people who want to get a job following the crisis. The second project on which we're currently working is the redefining of all the tools that we use to assess someone's skills. So today, we no longer use physical interviews to assess someone's skills. We use digital skills so that we can have an easier way of working, and so that we can use the full potential of technological tools. Third project on which we're working, we're trying to give communication credits to the young people that we're helping. Because the new reality is different from what we knew, I've asked for a new budget intended for communication purposes be given to young job seekers. What is also important is that the Foreign Ministry has called upon us to organize the agricultural fair of our country, but people cannot go from one city to the next. Not anymore, or not as easily as they used to. So the Agricultural Ministry has asked us to organize an event while trying to cope with this new reality. the agricultural world in our country is very important. It accounts for 40% of our GDP, and it's also a very important share of the job market. So we're working hand in hand with the Agricultural Ministry to make sure that this job market remains stable. We also have short-term trainings that we have designed with other partners. But how can we hold short-term training if we have no physical presence? It's complicated, right? So we have to rethink all the way we work. So basically we're working on all the main relevant elements important for our job market. We're trying to follow the good ideas that we get from the outside world, like this model that we are trying to apply from South Korea. Many things, many good ideas that we're trying to explore.
Pass the word over to Monsieur Youssef FENNIRA. He's the Director General for the National Agency of Employment and Self-Employment in Tunisia. You worked for the Tunisia German Chamber of Commerce, among others, and you also founded the Center for Professional Orientation and Reconversion, which focused mainly on the employability of young people. The floor is yours.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Do you copy? Can you hear me? Hello everyone. I hope that you can see me and that you can hear me clearly. I'm very pleased to be with you today. First, I'd like to seize this opportunity to, because everyone is gathered here, all the important stakeholders of the public employment services, I'd like to seize this opportunity to pay tribute to my very dear friend, the chairman of the WAPES, and with whom I had a phone call yesterday to talk about my own and his own experience. So it clearly shows that this mindset of WAPES is already inside us, in our DNA, and we have to go on this track so that we share as much as we can our experiences in time where employment is faced with many challenges. And when employment is faced with so many challenges, I don't think that there is a world with borders. Borders no longer exist. So it is important that we share our experience. I'd like to pay tribute to my friend from Togo as well. I'm very happy to see his face again today and to listen to him. And I'd like to thank all the WAPES team for organizing this webinar. That's very important for us, especially in such a difficult time. So I'm going to be talking about Tunisia. You see that I'm at home, but I must tell you that we were quite lucky in Tunisia because we had a very good crisis management. I'm at home because this is a bank holiday and I'm on holiday, but work following lockdown has restarted since the 4th of November. We have registered 0 new cases since then, except for exported cases, so Tunisians, nationals that are coming back to the countries for the first time since the beginning of the crisis, and they are currently locked down at the airport premises. But in a nutshell, current situation is under control, and we're crossing our fingers so that it goes on this way. But this is a big challenge because as of today, employment and everything that's related to the economic world is suffering, and we've seen that some workers have worked a lot during the COVID-19 crisis, like the health workers. Even in Tunisia, we registered 8,000 cases, 47 casualties, but we haven't had any casualty for a few weeks, so let's continue crossing our fingers. But now we have to do something on the economic field, and what we have decided is to work on 3 main axes. From the beginning of the crisis, the first thing that we did is that we ramped up the implementation, and implementation is a word that we've heard a lot in today's discussion, but we have ramped up the process of digitalization. Our agency had already started on this endeavor, but we've seen that with the COVID-19 crisis, if there is one positive thing with all this crisis is that it accelerated the digital transformation, and it clearly showed how necessary it was to digitalize all services. So what we've done since the first week of April, so roughly a week before following the beginning of the crisis, we launched a digital platform called ANETI, which means in Tunisian, just train yourself. So this platform groups together a whole array of trainings, digital trainings for job seekers who could no longer go out on the street and follow physical training. So this is important for employability. We've given many courses on employability, but also what is important for us as public employment service to work on entrepreneurship. So there were many trainings offered on entrepreneurship. To give you an idea, our agency employs 1,500 employees. There are 12 million inhabitants in Tunisia, so 1,500 employees scattered all across the 100 agencies that we have on the Tunisian territory. We have 24 places where entrepreneurship is also taught, and these are our two main priorities, employment and entrepreneurship. So for the young people, the young job seekers who could no longer attend physical meetings, we wanted to offer this possibility. So that's what we wanted to do right from the beginning of the crisis. We wanted to offer them training at home. The second choice that we've made very early following the beginning of the crisis is that we have increased the number of so-called helped contracts so that more companies could hire people without paying taxes or too much taxes, and the state would also help in paying the wages of the workers, and this has been done in collaboration with the Social Affairs Ministry. And what we've also done, and the employee of ANETI, of our agency, were very much courageous. We continued working in our premises with a minimal service. So for the outside world, our premises were closed, obviously, but some people still continued to come to work because we had some work to do to make sure that we can pay all the helped contracts, because we are the one managing those kind of contracts. When companies hire people with a partial public health, we're the one paying for this. So we needed to make sure that some people would actually take care of this. So these were the main decisions that we took right from the beginning of the crisis, with 80% of our services, of course, that we made, that we digitalized, basically, that we continued with digital solutions. All the secondary services, of course, were left behind for the period following the COVID-19 crisis. And the second objective for us is the medium and the long term, and therefore we've worked on several measures impacting different kind of populations. The first one that we want to target is the entrepreneurs. For this population, we decided to create a budget envelope with the help of the World Bank and the French Development Agency. We worked on a budget to enable those people to get a bonus, an additional bonus, if they are member of the ANETI, our agency. They will get a budget to help them get through this complicated period. We've also implemented an aid program for the people who will lose their job during this period. Today we're working on a program so that those people can actually be some kind of priority to find a job again following this crisis, so that their potential future employer wouldn't have to pay taxes on their wages, things like that. And the third target public that we have, and this might be interesting for other countries that might be dealing with the same kind of case that we have, especially for the informal economy. We've seen that people working in this kind of economy have been very much impacted by this crisis. As it has been said, we've seen how important public agencies and public stakeholders were, and everyone is panicked because of the consequences of this crisis. So everyone turns to the state And that's when we understand how important the state can be, right? But people working in the informal, so-called informal economy cannot get any kind of legal aid, right? Because they're not on the they don't pay taxes and they're not abiding by the law. So what we have decided is to implement a program for those people working in the informal economy in partnership with microfinancial institutions, with the objective of having as many people as possible going back to the formal job sector so that they can be working in a legal way and then protected in such difficult times as this one we're dealing with. And then the last target public that we had, target public that we had was the companies themselves, so that we can help them according to how bad they have been impacted. You know that tourism is a key sector, for instance, for Tunisia. We're trying to kickstart this sector given the positive signals that we can get from the non-recorded cases in our country. And therefore we need to make sure that tourism can actually work over the holiday period. For now, tourism has been badly impacted because hotels are being used for other purposes right now, and we need to target those kind of tourism companies to help them get through the crisis. Also, small and medium enterprises like hairdressers and bars and things like that. We need to help all those stakeholders, and we're going to give aid to each and every company that would need it to get over the crisis, so that they can pay the wages of their workers, they can pay the bills of the providers, so back and so forth. So we've created a digital platform. Well, it's not us really, but I mean, as far as the our government, our country is concerned, we've created such a platform. And this digital platform is called Help Enterprise, and another one called Batinda, so that everyone can get help. So these are the measures following the COVID-19 crisis that we've implemented and that were very relevant to make sure that we can deal with the crisis and get over it. And to talk about the longer term, crisis is here. Of course we have to react, we need to adapt our measures, our reality, but we should not forget about the fact that we have an ultimate goal. ANETI has launched several months ago its vision for the Horizon 2030 with 4 main pillars, that is digitalization, quality, because today our public employment services are suffering from a so-called quality issue. We're focusing too much on quantity but not really on quality. And at the end of the day, companies have to offer qualitative jobs. And this leads me to the third axis that we've chosen, that is communication, because quality is linked to attractiveness and communication that we can put in place, especially today for citizens. And then the fourth pillar is the ANETI Academy, and I can tell you that we have launched a training workshop for ANETI, so that the whole of the our partners can share our experience. Even for international partners, there will be employment advisors, there will be a hub for entrepreneurship. So these are the main pillars on which ANETI is going to be working within the framework of our vision. So we're trying to accelerate digitalization, and we are planning by the end of the year to launch a new web portal for the ANETI with a matching system for skills, with a way to accompany all the workers with psychometrical tests as soon as you get enrolled, so that we can better guide job seekers in terms of training and in terms of what the companies need according to to each and every profile of candidates, of job seekers. So that's what we're trying to come up with, and that's what we've been working on for a year, basically. Well, thank you very much.
I think for another 15 minutes we will be here with you, and it will be great if you stay on. The third speaker is Francisco CAPARROS. He's the head of unit for employment policies, evaluation, strategy and quality process in the Public Employment Service of the Balearic Islands in Spain. Francisco, you are an expert and manager in employment policies and employment services for many years, and you're also consulting on international level for the European Union and the ILO and others. Francisco, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Miguel. It's a pleasure to be here for talking for a while about what we did in Spain to tackle the coronavirus effects in our Spanish labor market. And I will try to plug in my presentation. So here we go. You can see Spain, the Spanish Employment Services is included in the European Public Employment Network and also is a member of WAPES. So what happened in Spain and what is the Spanish employment systems? Because usually the structures affect the way that you are delivering policies. The Spanish employment system is structured into a national authority, SEPE, plus 17 regional employment services. The national authority is in charge of employment policy coordination, income support schemes, and also represent the Spanish system at international level. The second counterpart is the regional employment services, which are in charge of active labor market policies and job search assistance and matching. However, it is important to highlight that both levels are sharing the local employment offices. Until now, we have more than 700 local employment offices in order to facilitate citizens and unemployed to enjoy services without going to different places. But what happened in Spain in terms of labor market? What data can say? Here, the graph indicates that the general trend of unemployment registered in Spain was decreasing from 2016 until this year. It is true that you can see some oscillation between the summer and the winter peaks because of seasonal activities such as tourism. But what is clear is that the coronavirus effect affects seriously the tendency, as you can see from February 2020, how it's tilting up steadily from February 2020. The blue line is the general data, and also the green line is female unemployed, and the red line is the male unemployed. Here, the key message is that on one hand, we had the labor market shock because hiring is collapsing, unemployment rises. But the interesting point is you can see that there are greater effect on a specific groups, plus different effect for different economic activities. It is clear that we have a gender issue, as females shows a higher number of unemployed compared with male. That means that we need to develop specific policies for different vulnerable groups. The main Spanish policy responses can be articulated into 5 big strands: preventing from dismissals, registering unemployed, improving unemployment coverage, active labor market policies and the new challenges, and last but not least, a new PERS strategy. Preventing from dismissals, what we did in Spain is to increase the flexibility of the employment protection regulation. We tried to improve coverage for workers and avoid dismissals through two different mechanisms. On one hand, the short-time work schemes, but on the other hand, the temporary redundancy procedures. It means that Spanish employment system is helping the companies to maintain the workers in order to avoid laid-off. Another important policy in this field is the suspension of the duration and the calculation in temporary contracts, including the training schemes and other learning agreements, to ensure that contracts will achieve all intended effects in terms of service provision. Registering employed, we try to facilitate the registration of job seekers in order to access to policies and unemployment benefits. Right now, unemployed do not need to register in person at the office, and they don't have to renew registration while coronavirus confinement measures continue. It means an extra effort from the employment offices to use in a massive way online and telephone channels. Improving unemployment coverage. We try to help people to get a quick access to benefits. We developed a specific process for companies as a redundancy temporary we talked before, and we suspended the deadlines to apply for entitlements while coronavirus measures continued. We also incorporated an extraordinary allowances and benefits for workers that usually are less protected, such as self-employed, cultural industrial workers, social care workers, and domestic staff. We tried to put in place the compatibility of unemployment benefits with agricultural work to encourage labor supply shift to primary sectors. I imagine that many of us absolutely agree with the idea on how coronavirus cut off global productive chains and affected primary sectors or health supply industry. But we can't stop, and we need to go forward and maintain food chains or health chains. So we consider that it's a good idea to compatibilize unemployment benefits with these sensible activities. About active labor market policies, many changes already explained it, Fons and the other speakers, but we can see that in Spain the measures are articulated in vocational educational training, public employment programs, job seeker services and the relation with employers, and measures about entrepreneurship and social economy. In vocational educational training, we are trying to increase the use of online and virtual platforms. We are doing an effort to continue remotely training, but in case that it's not possible because the training requires face-to-face activities, we flexibilize the training through extension of the course or training breaks. Public employment programs, nowadays we are trying to be more flexible, and also we are intending to cover labor shortages affected by coronavirus or other general activities. Many regional employment services are programming public employment programs to boost labor demand through municipalities after the coronavirus confinement measures. And about job seeker services and relation with employers, we are promoting employer services through online channels like digital recruitment and more cooperation with private employment services and other stakeholders. We are also offering online counseling, and we are focused on shortage occupations such as healthcare services, social care, and agricultural activities. Another important point in job seeker services is the importance of being more flexible in the activation strategy with the unemployed. It may affect the individual action plans and the mutual obligations signed and agreed by the employment counselor and the unemployed, but at the moment we need to be more flexible to go forward. Last but not least, entrepreneurship and social economy. We are offering technical assistance and financial support in form of credits to keep alive macro enterprises. And nowadays, the Spanish system is trying to redesign the global public employment services strategy, because it's clear that we have to adapt our PES operational model to the coronavirus situation, and it means to scale down less essential services, to reallocate staff, and secure IT systems, because we are backing up in online channels more than ever before. We are also enforcing more cooperation among national and regional PES in order to help unemployed to be registered and to participate in different policies. And we are preparing our PES for the post-coronavirus labor market and economy. A new redesign of the National Employment Plan and fundraising is on place, but it's important to highlight that we still keep the focus on the most vulnerable workers. We have an action plan for youth employment, because usually youth unemployment doubles other types of unemployment, and a specific action plan for long-term unemployed. We believe in Spain that no one has to be left behind, and for this we are focusing on the most vulnerable workers too. As I am running out of time, I would like to conclude with one single remark. I think that it's high time for PES to do their best and show their relevance as a public good in the same way that the health system does. There is a tsunami in the labor market horizon, and PES must be proactive and help citizens and communities to avoid being excluded from labor and wealth. So we have the opportunity to show our added value for our society. Let's do it. Thank you very much, and I will be happy to answer any questions. Miguel, now the floor is yours.
To all the inspiring words and reports from all three speakers. I'll take one question that came from the floor, and I would like to ask the same question to all three speakers, maybe going the other direction and starting with Francisco. You already hinted at it, but I think that one of the great chances, and that was also asked from the floor in this crisis, is that services can be restructured. So we can move from a service that was maybe more focused on face-to-face to a more digital service, but it's also a possibility to blend services, not have only digital or not have only face-to-face, but kind of combine it. So my question to you, Francisco, and then also to Monsieur FENNIRA and Monsieur AMOUSSOU is, how do you foresee how your services will be delivered in the near mid-future? Will you go more towards digital, or will you rely on face-to-face, something that is very emphasized and valued by the clients, or will you go for blended service? Francisco, the floor is yours.
Well, I think that is the $1 million question. What will be the future of our services? In my humble opinion, I believe that we are moving to more blended services. Some of the new services provided through digital mechanism will stay for a long time in the way that PES are developing their services, but also we need face-to-face services, face-to-face services for vulnerable workers or people who has not the skills to interact in a digital way. So in the Next future, I will say that we are moving for a blended services, the same that in the educational services, and who knows in the future, probably digital will gain more space to face-to-face services, but still will be required the face-to-face services. Now the floor is yours.
Francisco. Monsieur FENNIRA, I would like to switch to you, please. We lost Tunisia at this point. Maybe we can then go directly back to Togo, to Monsieur AMOUSSOU.
Oui, je suis là.
Here I am. I agree with my Spanish colleague that we need to combine digital and face-to-face. In Togo, we have an important digital fracture. The connection 4G is not available everywhere. And we have job seekers who don't have the resources to access these online services. So we need to develop also digital services in themselves. But the mass population also speaks the local languages. That means that our services need to be provided in local languages. If we have artificial intelligence, we can take this into account to make sure that we can provide also in local languages. That's what I wanted to add.
Sorry.
Oui, j'avais indiqué que nous avons...
Yes, I wanted to talk about the digital fracture. 4G is not everywhere. Fiber optic is not everywhere, so we need to take this into account. We need to mix the services, so digital and face-to-face, and have measures even beyond COVID. There's one element that's very important, it's with the local languages. Our population doesn't speak the international languages, so our services need to be provided maybe with radio services, with simple languages, because everybody cannot access mobile phones, 4G and 5G. That's all I had to add. Thank you. Regarding Tunisia, I believe that we have a certain presence, a digital presence on the territory, but it's impossible not to talk about face-to-face meetings. The coaching, for example, needs to take place face-to-face. Populations are more vulnerable than others. And it's true that it's a difficult question. It depends on the country, on the reality of each country, and it also depends on the population that we're aiming at. So there's a population with which we will be able to do a follow-up, a digital follow-up, and for those we need to do it indeed, because more we direct ourselves towards the digital, more people will need it, and more this will give us time. And I think all our public employment services have the issue of the lack of resources and advising God knows how many job seekers, and the more we lose time and we focus, the better it is. We need to really focus and find a balance between digital and face-to-face. So rethink completely the model of an employment agency. What is that indeed?
By saying that this crisis, as bad and devastating as it is, also holds a lot of opportunities for the service that public employment services are providing, and the policies, by capitalizing on resources, the resources that are there and that are helping a lot now to help the most vulnerable and the people that are affected by the crisis. It's about finding the right mix of services that cater to the future of work, but also basically conserve what public employment services have been doing well for so many years. It's also about being proactive, which we have seen in the examples a lot of public employment services are already doing or are aware of that they need to do it. Setting an example is important. Fons underlined that for the new world of work. Do what you're preaching in your own public employment service, and to work in partnerships. I think in a global world, but also in a world that is shook by crisis, it is important to rely on partnerships and not do everything alone. This was our first web conference. Thank you for joining. It was had a high participation until the end, so thank you very much for staying with us. We will have further conferences, further web conferences. Before that, we would like to know how you liked it. And for that, you will get by email an evaluation, very short, brief evaluation that we would be very happy if you took a couple of minutes' time just to tell us how you liked it and answer the questions that will be in the email, so that we can see what we can do better for next time. The planned topics so far for next two possible web conferences are PES and teleworking during and after the COVID-19 crisis. So within the future of work and this crisis, we take a particular topic of the telework and which advantages, disadvantages, and learnings that has. And next topic will be digital tools used by the public employment service to stay in touch with the clients, not only with the job seekers, but also with employers and maybe also other partners. This panel today relied a lot on the content of the speakers. So we're searching for speakers for these two topics, telework and digital tools to stay in touch with clients. Today we had a panel. A panel is a panel with only men. So next time we strongly encourage women to participate and to send us possible presentations that we can include and have a more balanced panel of speakers for this. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure for me to facilitate this event. I wish you a good day and hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.